Well, I'll go ahead and call the April 5th meeting of the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority monthly trust meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is items from the chairman, and I have none. The second item is residents to be heard, and I don't believe that there are any. So moving on down to item 4, which is approval of the minutes of the March 1st COPTA board meeting. Is there a motion to approve? It's been moved and seconded. Please vote electronically.
I vote in favor.
Oh. Okay, motion passes. Moving to item 5, which is our consent docket, we have 6 items. And item D, we have a correction to the resolution, and so we're going to pull that and consider that separate. Is there any other items on the consent docket that any of the trustees would like to pull and consider individually? If not, is there a motion to approve the consent docket? It's been moved and seconded. Please vote electronically. Motion passes. Okay, item D is in the consent docket. Then we're going to consider that now. Do you want to go ahead and explain the discrepancy?
Sure.
The Scribner's error.
The Scribner's error, yes, thank you. So in the agenda item for item D that got moved, that was the item with Toller Manufacturing. So the agenda item itself states that it's an estimated cost of $2,115,000, but the resolution that we're asking the board to approve states a cost estimate of $2,114,625. So we, in the memo, had rounded it up to the 2.115, and the resolution, though, had the original amount. So we're asking that the board would approve the amended amount in our resolution of $2,115,000. And there is a copy of the corrected resolution at your seat with the corrected amount in it.
Okay, are there any questions or comments? If not, yes, we need a...
Robert moved.
Robert
I'll
moved.
second.
And so it's been moved and seconded. Please vote orally.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion passes. Okay, moving on down to item 6 on our agenda, which is items for individual consideration. Item A is a resolution authorizing the filing of an application for a grant under Section 5339 for the fiscal year 2024 grants for bus and bus facility programs and the low or no emission vehicle program, and approving the allocation of local match funds up to $140,000. Suzanne?
Yes, so this is an item that we bring to the board for approval frequently, and we've had some good success with this particular grant. So the grant is a bus and bus facility grant. So over the past 4 years, we've actually received $11.7 million from this particular grant, and that's funded 24 CNG buses and 1 electric bus. And so normally we do ask for authorization to apply for a grant for buses, but this time we're actually asking authorization to apply for a grant for a facility. So this facility would be a bus wash facility. At headquarters, we have what's kind of like a drive-through power wash for our buses, and it's old. It's I shouldn't say it's old, it's from the 90s. It's antiquated for its equipment and its useful life, I'll put it that way. So it's, right, don't want to offend anyone here. But nonetheless, so the power wash is got well beyond its useful life, and so we would like to take a run for this grant to fund replacing that wash. So we've done some pretty good cost estimating, even putting a little contingency in there, and we think the overall project with this grant we could fund. Of course, there's an 80-20 split with this grant, so the 80% we would be seeking from the FTA would be $700,000, and then we'd be pitching in a local match of $140,000.
Okay, are there any questions or comments? We need to keep our buses clean.
We
so
do, very important.
Is there a motion to approve item A? It's been moved and seconded. Please vote electronically. Item passes. Item B is a request for proposals for on-call transportation engineering and planning services and authorizing the administrator to advertise for bids.
Okay.
Suzanne?
So this is the second time that we'll be bringing an RFP to the board for on-call planning engineers, planning services. So currently, we have a contract with 3 different entities. We have Olson, HNTB, and Hatch LTK. So these providers, what they do is we'll have basically on-call, as the agenda mentioned, needs for cost estimating, or perhaps we've got a very complex grant that we need some support with to help our chances winning that grant, like a RAISE grant. We've used one of these consultants to help us with those grant applications. So there's just various things that will come up that we need a little extra expertise to help us with. And so this on-call contract doesn't obligate us to anything, but it does allow us to have in place a variety of different engineering support services, so that if, depending on what the job comes through that we need done, the different expertise, we've got a variety on our bench, so to speak, to draw upon to do the work, not only from a skill standpoint, but also from a cost standpoint. We can put the work out and see what the cost estimate would be from the different consultants. So this RFP would hopefully draw several different engineering companies to want to bid on it, and we'd hope to present to the board in the future months some different contracts to approve that we've negotiated from the RFP.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments about item B? If not, is there a motion to approve the request for proposals? It's been moved and seconded. Please vote electronically. Motion passes. Item C is an amendment number 7 and change order number 7 on our Northwest Bus Rapid Transit Center downtown on North Broadway Avenue and West Main Street, providing service north on Classen Boulevard to the Northwest Expressway and Meridian Avenue at a cost of $127,570,066.
Yes, so this item, Jesse's going to come up and speak about the specifics, but essentially this will amend our contract with Rudy for their services for the Northwest Rapid. With that amendment, in the change orders, we'd be at a total of $17.2 million, and Jesse can walk you through what those changes are.
Good morning.
Yeah, so this is, like Suzanne said, this is our final change order amendment for the Rapid Northwest project. So quick refresher on how we got here, right? So this project was bid as a line item project, right? So if you think about like a building or something like that, those are typically bid as like a lump sum. But because this is more like a civil project, these are bid as line items, right? So our contractor, Rudy Construction, they receive a bid sheet that has line items for every single item. They provide a cost for that. As the project progresses, those line items change, and so we're here with change order and amendment number 7. This essentially wraps up those quantities for all those different line items that are part of that project. So some of the main takeaways of that are, you'll notice in there's an amendment for traffic stripes, right? So as we were going through the process of doing our pre-revenue service, having our buses out there running on the alignment, there were a few things that we noticed, right? So you do as much testing as you can prior to that, but as you're actually running those buses on the alignment, you start to notice a few things. So an example of that is at Northwest 56th and Independence, where we're going southbound on Independence, making a left turn onto 56. We had to, where we thought the engineer, best guess was, were to put that stop bar, but as we're making that turn, we realized that we needed to move that stop bar back a few more feet to make it safe, right? So that's an example of the traffic stripe quantity changes that are in this amendment. Another example of that is there's a $22,000 radar sensor amendment. So at Northwest Expressway and Penn, we basically put in some fail-safe items, right? So this sensor is there just in case the traffic signal prioritization fails. we have those sensors there because it's a pretty important intersection, right? We've got to make sure that that is always working. We've got that fail-safe there to make sure that the buses can get through that intersection. Another example of that is that there's a deduct for $12,000 for a 12-inch tapping valve and box. This is another one of those examples where you do your best as an engineer to identify what needs to be done. But sometimes after you get below ground, you start to know that maybe there's a workaround or something like that. So that's an example of us being able to work with our engineers and our contractors to save some money. There is a change order in there for $7,800 for TSP activation. This was, again, while we were going through that process of starting the project up, we had to contract with Mike Taylor Traffic to come out and do some more programming for our traffic signal prioritization. And so that's an example of that. So our total amendment for number 7 is $119,758.97. This is a 0.91% increase. Our total change order, total for change order amendments 1 through 7 is $4,035,928.49. This brings our total contract amount to $17,248,067.98. A reminder that this original contract estimate was $18 million, so we came in under budget. So we'll take that for sure. So if there's any questions, be happy to answer any questions.
I like it's coming in under budget.
I do too.
Are there any comments or questions? Robert?
As we approach and we're doing planning for South, will we be able to look at some of the issues that came up on Northwest and be able to incorporate those into the projections for
Yeah.
South if that
Yeah,
passes?
so that's a great question. So there's a little bit of money left over if you think about the total contract budget there. So our next steps are essentially working with Public Works to finalize everything with the project, right? They've got a lot of inspection sheets to go through, things like that. So we plan on bringing an item to the board next month to initiate warranty bonds, right? To basically finalize the project. We'll verify every single thing as far as the budget goes, and then there's ancillary projects, right? So those are the items that you're talking about. So we'll be working with our contractor to identify costs for those and prioritize those ancillary projects and see which ones we can do first, and basically use all of that grant funds to be able to maximize the grant funds that we can to take care of those items. Yep. So an example of one of those items would be the access from Northwest Expressway and Penn stop at Penn Square Mall down to the parking lot, right? Instead of folks having to go all the way around to access the parking lot, we want to make sure we provide that direct access.
But those grant funds need to be used timely, so they'll
Absolutely.
be used more likely on the Northwest BRT. I think you were asking about the South project, and so there will be additional grant requests for that as MAPS 4 progresses on with that. But they're
Gotcha.
not to
Yep.
that point yet to request grant money for that. But I don't think we could save this until the project for South is ready.
That's
Yeah, the question was more around the items that came up during this process that we may not have expected.
Right.
If we could, for planning purposes, make sure that we incorporate some of those costs into the budget for the South Side, not that
I
we're
follow you.
not moving funds from one to the
Yeah,
other.
yeah, I follow you. So to that point, so our team, from day one, we've been tracking like lessons learned, right? So we've got a long list of lessons learned that we've already provided to MAPS 4, and we'll continue to do that as we, again, close out the project and make sure we maximize everything that we can, absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you.
So is there a motion to approve the amendment and the change order number 7? It's been moved and seconded. Please vote electronically. Motion passes. Okay, moving on to item D. Is there a motion to move the item to the heel of the docket and enter into executive session on this item?
So moved.
So it's been moved and seconded. If you could vote individually. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we will move item D to the heel of the docket. Moving on to item 7 on our agenda is ratification of claims and payroll. Are there any questions or comments about our claims and payroll for the period of March 5th through March 26th? If not, is there a motion to ratify? It's been moved and seconded. Please vote electronically. Motion passes. Item 8 is to receive our financial reports. This is the COPTA schedules of revenues and expenses, budget to actual for the month ending February 29th. Suzanne?
All right, so this report is 8 months into our fiscal year. And as usual, we'll start on page 2, our transportation operations. So our total revenues and our total expenditures left our operating income are at negative $1,773,000. So our expenses did exceed our revenues. The revenue year to date is $27.4 million, so about less than 1% over budget, so about where we budgeted for right now. And then our expenses year to date reflect 2% over budget, the $29 million listed there. So I was just going to walk you through a few of the revenue line items. So at the very top, there's 3 rows there, starting with Farebox down to Embark Plus. Those 3 lines, essentially those are our fare revenue. So the total fare revenue year to date is $1,355,000 and $203,000 below budget. And so if you go over to the right-hand columns, the prior actual year to date, I thought I'd share a comparison with you of where we were at this time last year with our fare revenues. So we're about $80,000 less than we were prior year, which is 6%. And I know that might be kind of puzzling. Our ridership is up. And so I just thought I'd mention that there's really not necessarily a direct correlation with ridership and our revenue in our fare boxes, because we have universal passes, we have daily passes, we have half price sale. So any number of variables that can affect the revenues. So if we have more of the daily passes being used in single fare, for example, those things can affect our revenues when it comes to our fare collection. So there's quite a bit of variables that could impact that. But I did just want to bring your attention to that our revenues for fares are performing lower than last year.
You're saying that ridership is up. Is that a more recent trend? Are we seeing ridership go up as a result maybe of cost of increase of vehicles and loans to acquire vehicles?
Oh.
Have you seen any of that?
That's a great question. I personally can't speak to the answer to that, Trustee Ruiz, I apologize, but I can say that our ridership has been continuing to grow. Certainly our Rapid, and I believe it's in our transit report, our Rapid's performing quite well. We had some different free periods this fiscal year as well, which could impact our revenues. December, because of launching service, we had a couple of weeks of free fare. So those are just all things that can impact the revenue when it comes to our fare box. So we, of course, will continue monitoring this and making sure all of our reporting is accurate, those kinds of things, and we do. But at this point, no cause for concern there.
Yeah.
So I guess all these years on COPPA, I've never stopped to separate some things out. So under which item is like the universal passes, and where will we find that?
So the fare media sales, that line, that's where passes, the income from passes come in, and you'll see we're actually higher than we were last year. So it stands to reason that, which is a good thing. I mean, that's very economical for our customers to buy the passes.
Yeah, that is a funny realization to have right now. So, okay, all right.
And you'll notice that it's up $43,000 off of last year. So people are tuning in to the fact that you can buy the passes and save money.
That's great. Do you think the BRT might be, I mean, I guess we're playing, economist right now, but I wonder if the BRT and more people becoming acclimated to that service and then realizing, wait, I should just buy a day pass or a monthly pass. It's probably happening.
Could be. That way they can ride streetcar, they can ride rapid, fixed route. So it's just that the day passes are universal.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good move to make. Any other questions on that before I move on? All right, so I also wanted to bring your attention to the state government subsidies. That's about midway through on the revenues. So our budget, you'll notice, is $1,065,000, and it has stood at that amount for quite a few years, but I'm happy to report this year, we actually got a bump in our state subsidy of nearly double, actually. So we will be receiving a total this fiscal year of $1.9 million. So you'll see our revenues, our year-to-date revenues are $1.3 million, which puts us at a positive variance in that revenue line of $223,000. We have one more installment we're expecting this fiscal year from that subsidy of $644,000. So we'll end the year in that line item particularly about $900,000 above where we thought we would be at the beginning of the year. So one other line I always like to talk about is our federal grant line. That's a couple of rows above the state government subsidy row. So you'll see that we are right on track, just about right on track there with our budget. Negative variance $19,900, which is 0.5% below where we thought we'd be this time of the year. I'd mentioned to you that our the revenue that goes into this line comes from our formula grants from the FTA. So every year we get an apportionment. And in fact, yesterday the apportionment numbers were released. So for our federal fiscal year 24, so that's the process that takes quite a few months into our fiscal year to get that. But what we're going to be receiving soon is our federal fiscal year 23 dollars. So the process I just thought I'd walk you through. So we program those dollars once we get that apportionment. We work together to program those dollars to decide what we'll be putting in our operating and then what we'll be using to fund capital projects. So we're grateful that we can leverage those dollars to help us in both areas. And so then we go through the process of putting that into the FTA's grant management system, and then it has to go through several reviews at the federal level, and then finally it gets approved, and then it's called, our grant is awarded to us. Then we have access to draw on that grant. And so just within the last week, we got the grant awarded, and so we do have what's called pre-award authority, and that means that any expenses that we incurred all the way back up to the beginning of this fiscal year, we can actually draw from that grant. So we plan on in the month of April taking a larger draw to help boost our revenues to close in some of this gap that you're seeing on the statement. So I just thought I'd walk you through that. Hopefully I haven't created more questions of how that process works, but if I have, I'm happy to walk through any of that. It's a pretty tedious process that takes several months, and staff work diligently to stay on top of the FTA, just kind of making sure that we're at the top of their list to get the funds approved. So we will be taking a large draw in the month of April this month. So you'll be seeing that in 2 months from now in terms of the financial statement. Of course, we're always a month behind on our statements that we look at. So now moving down to expenditures. I'm going to start, instead of at the top, I'm actually going to start at the bottom. Supplies, we've talked about that pretty much every month for several months now, the issues that are causing our supply line item to be over budget. So you'll see that we're $1 million over budget for year to date. I also had mentioned to you going up the lines, other services and fees were $205,000 over budget. That particular line, we haven't talked about this before, is the CNG facility that is on site in headquarters. We have to maintain, of course, that facility, and it is now a little over 3 years in operation. And so we have had some parts that we've had to service and replace. And so our budget did not have that considered in it in terms of those particular costs to maintain and service the parts at our CNG facilities. So therefore, the $205,000 you're seeing there, a large part of that comes from some expenses that we incurred to maintain our CNG facility. The personal services line is where I'm going to need to dive in a little bit with you. I wanted to bring your attention to an error that has been found with the way this has been reported. So the actuals that you see there, the $18.3 million, that is correct. The error, though, is in the column to the left of that. You'll see that the header is the original budget year to date, and it says $17,999,000. In fact, that should be a different number. And I was going to walk you through how that number is created. So the original budget year to date, in particular when it comes to our personal services, this comes down to payroll, to salaries and wages. And so every year there's 26 payrolls. And so we take our budget, we divide it by 26, and so we know that that's our payroll, how we're going to spread what we're forecasting our spend to be. Of course, the actuals are going to be different, but this is just our budget process. And so in the months where there's 2 payrolls, which is typical, 10 out of the 12 months, there's 2 payrolls, then that month will reflect 2 payrolls. And then we can know which months will have 3 payrolls in it. And so those months will have a boost to the budget. So in this instance, the error occurred in that the month where the 3 payrolls should have occurred didn't. There was only 2 payrolls in it. And then the month where 2 payrolls were occurred, there were 4 payrolls in it. And so this is all just budget. This is not actuals. So the reason this matters, though, is because it overstates, in this case, where we think we would be with our budget. And so then, if our actuals are pretty close to where we think we'd be, it just reflects that we're doing better with our budget than we actually are. So our budget it shows $300,000 negative variance, when in reality, the negative variance is $1.8 million. So I acknowledge that as a significant change, a 2% basically variance versus an 11% variance. Again, it doesn't affect our actuals. It doesn't affect our bottom line of how we ended this month 8 in terms of our operating loss income. What it does is it just tells us, hey, we're a little bit more over budget than we thought we were at this time of the year. And so I'd like to couple with that explanation that we are holding a finance committee meeting later this month. We'll have a budget amendment, which we were planning on even before this was discovered, to amend our fiscal year budget. In that meeting, we'll also be presenting our proposed FY25 budget. So I know that's a lot to take in. I wanted to just walk you through the process of, how those numbers are created in the first place, the original year-to-date numbers. Those are projections of where we think we'll be at this time of the year.
And so this is a preview for next month's report, which will show the corrected
Yes.
amount.
Yes, so next month's report will have the corrected amount in our original year-to-date budget. Again, the actuals were not incorrect.
Yeah.
And so the variance, though, will be significantly higher. So that's why I wanted to point it out. And quite frankly, just working on our budget amendment and seeing where we're looking at ending the year with our personal expenses is what raised the flag, because we're projecting to end the year quite a bit higher, and seeing a $300,000 variance, that didn't make sense. And so just digging into it is how we found that formula error in an Excel spreadsheet. So I apologize for that mistake, and it's something we're fixing, and next month's report will reflect that. So I'm just going to pause before I move to the next financial statement, just make sure that that's clear if there's any questions or comments about it.
Suzanne, you may have said this number, but what should that $17,999,000?
Yes.
What?
Yeah, let me tell you that. So it should be $16,431,000.
Okay.
And then I'm just doing the math for you. That variance would then be negative $1,865,000.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so if no further questions on that particular statement, we can move over to parking, which is page 4. So on parking, our revenues exceeded our expenses by $1,339,000, so just about 7% ahead of where we budgeted. Our year-to-date revenues are $4.6 million, about 10% above budget. And our expenses total $3.3 million, also about 10% above budget. So I thought I'd explain that and walk you through that. So if we go up to the revenues, we'll start there. The events revenue is about 10% ahead of budget, and really what that boils down to is with events, we never know what events are going to happen in a year, and we're always very grateful when we see our events are much higher performing than they were this time last year, actually $380,000 more than where we were this time last year. And so when the events occur, then of course that affects our revenues. And then there's a relationship with our event revenues there. When we have more events, that means we have more parking attendants to manage those events from PCI. So you'll see under parking garage operations that line item under expenses is also up 10%. So there's a relationship in our expenses with PCI and with those events. Also under revenues, I thought I'd explain the miscellaneous line item. So there's about $61,000 of revenue year to date in miscellaneous. And so that revenue comes from the city reimbursing the parking fund for security upgrades at the Cox Garage. Those expenses occurred last fiscal year, but the way the arrangement was with the city is that they were reimbursing us on our actual. So all those invoices collected, and then the city reimbursed the parking fund. So that's what that $61,000 is under miscellaneous revenue. So back down under expenditures, I've mentioned to you the parking garage operations and why that's a little over budget there. I also had mentioned to you other services and fees. You'll see a negative $90,000 variance. That 2/3 of that is related to removing paint from the walls and the stairwells and elevators at the Sheridan Walker Garage, so as a maintenance expense item. So one last statement I'll walk you through is the streetcar operations, which is page 7. So with streetcar, our revenues exceeded our expenses by $453,000. And our revenues year-to-date are $4.6 million, which is about 1.5% below budget. And our expenses year-to-date are $4.2 million, which are 2% below budget. So they pretty much net out to be right on target with our budget. So on the expenditures, I just thought since we're 8 months into the year, I'd walk you through, you'll notice there's a footnote, and we always have a footnote on these statements saying there's 1 month that we're in arrears when it comes to our payments to Herzog. So I thought I'd just walk you all through, if we were to plug in that invoice, the arrear amounts that are in footnote number 2, the $435,000 for operations and the $47,000 for supplies, where would we actually be with our operating and loss? And so I've plugged those numbers in for you, and I just thought I would share with you the math I've done here, which basically you're seeing we've got a $453,000 operating income in the positive. If we were to plug those numbers in, it would take that down to a negative $29,000 operating income, so for the entire year. So it would bring it down into a negative. However, we've still got some advertising dollars that we can that we'll be seeing in the next couple of months, which will boost our revenues up some. And of course, I don't anticipate we're going to hit our budget on our streetcar fares, the $119,000 we have budgeted for fares, but of course we'll continue working on that. We've now got a business development effort that will be focusing on ridership and getting more passes and fares from our ridership. So anyway, I just wanted to walk you through that, what it might look like if we put in those invoices that are in arrears. So those are my final comments on our financial statement. I know it's been a lengthier discussion than normal, but I did, again, just want to be transparent and walk you through those things. So if there's any questions on any of the statements, I'd be happy to answer those.
Are there any questions or comments? I know that on the streetcar fares, we sell tickets and it's kind of the honor system until they're asked to verify it through, we have people circulating around asking
Right.
to verify their fares, and I don't know quite how that's monitored, but I imagine that there's somebody out there every day doing that.
Yes, there is. We have fare inspectors, in fact, on our rapid buses as well, because that's, of course, there's not a fare box on those buses. So yes, we do have fare inspectors that audit throughout our system and asking people for their passes. So be prepared to show it.
Yeah. Okay, are there any other questions on our financials? If not, is there a motion to receive?
And Mr. Chairman, just a point of order, you're ratifying it as amended, as explained, with the changes that Suzanne pointed out.
Oh, okay, yes,
I think it goes without saying, but just to say it.
yes. Receive as explained or as ratified.
I'm not sure that we should do that, if it's okay if I just
Sure,
state, because
yeah.
this is a financial statement. I would be very hesitant to speak some numbers and make those changes and have you approve it different than what's in your packet. What I would recommend would be that next month's statement would have those corrections in them, and then when you see those, you can consider approving those. I would hesitate to amend this statement just because of it being a financial statement, if that's acceptable.
That's fine, just with the understanding that it'll be corrected.
Yes, okay,
Remember, all we're doing is receiving this,
Right.
yep,
not approving it.
okay. The motion to receive has been made and seconded. Please vote electronically. Motion passes. Okay, moving on to our program reports. First is a Bus Rapid Transit update. Jesse?
It's me again. Good morning.
You're right, you're right.
I'd ask how everybody's doing, but we've already answered that. So let's jump right into it. So show this every month. This is our status of construction. How about that, right? That's fancy. Thank you. Yes, thank you so much. Yes, I appreciate it. We talked about this a little bit earlier, right? But with that change order, that wraps up our construction. Our next steps, right? So our next steps are receiving all of those final inspection reports, wrapping up all of our certifiable elements that Eugene and the safety and security team are working on, wrapping all of that up. And then next month, we'll be bringing the substantial completion item to the board for approval. And then, like we talked about a little bit earlier also, that allows us to verify all of our budget. And we have those ancillary projects that we're looking at kicking off with our contractor, where we'll be using grant dollars to go toward those additional projects. And then and I believe Trustee Johnson mentioned this earlier, we have to expedite that, right? So with our grant, our period of performance ends September 1st of this year. So that means we need to expend all of those grant funds prior to September 1st. So we are expediting as quickly as we possibly can. All right, moving on. So we, as a transit agency, every year the Memorial Marathon kicks off, and we've been working closely with the Memorial Marathon and also OCPD to maximize our transit, being able to provide transit services during the marathon. We believe we have a plan, but today we'll speak specifically to the Rapid. So you can kind of see this map here shows just the swath that the marathon takes whenever they come to town. So all the way up to the north, all the way downtown, east, west. So a lot of our major streets will be closed during the marathon. This here shows the Rapid route whenever it comes to the marathon. So you can see that along Classen, right, where the marathon will be running, the Rapid system is impacted. So what did we do? So we worked with Marathon and OCPD to come up with a plan. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here, show a little bit more kind of those impacts. Again, Classen will be shut down for the runners. I believe Captain George has got it worked out to where there's still a lane of traffic open, but you can see the impact to the Rapid here. And then when it comes to downtown, again, so we come across 10th there, so we would end up crossing Classen, right? So working with PD, the plan that we've came up with was essentially a detour for the Rapid. So if you think about Rapid coming inbound, we'll be coming along Northwest Expressway, and at Penn, we'll be traveling southbound and coming in off of 4th Street to our transit center. So still being able to make that connection to our fixed route systems, but we will be impacted. The Rapid system will be impacted. All right, moving along, want to talk about our ridership. So this shows our ridership for the month of February for 2024. Our ridership cumulative total was a little over 32,000, so it's great, right? So this is a 17% increase over last month, and then our average daily ridership is a little over 1,128. This is a 25% increase over last month, which was 897. And then really, that's the average. Yep. And then taking a look at the cumulative total from our launch, we are sitting at 92,000 since our launch through the end of February, and our average daily ridership since launch is just a little over 1,000. And that completes my shortest presentation ever.
Thank you.
Or so you thought.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Would you mind returning to I think maybe the slide, not this one. Yeah, December, or what was December? When it launched?
Yeah.
What was the ridership number again? Would you remind us? When it was free?
I can show maybe a little bit
Oh, there
more
we go,
here,
okay.
right? So this shows our ridership in December.
Mm-hmm.
We were, going off of memory, right? We were about the same as we were here. We saw a little bit of a dip in January, but December and February have been right around a little over 30,000. It's pretty great.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, congratulations, everybody. That's neat. Good. Enjoy that, citizens of OKC.
There was one day in February that it bounced up to 1,500
Yeah.
riders in a single day.
Yep.
That's great.
All right, any other questions?
Well, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, our next report is a Mobility Management Services report. Mara? Good morning.
Morning. How's everybody doing today? It's great to see everyone. Well, we're just going to jump right into it. The numbers for ridership that I'm sharing with you are through February. I apologize. We tried very hard to get March in this and just did not quite meet the deadline. So for our senior services, we're doing very good. Overall, we are quite a bit above COVID and pre-COVID numbers in terms of demand and the number of trips we're providing. As you can see here, this is funded through our Older Americans Act grant and our partnership with Area-Wide Aging Agency. Part of that grant agreement requires us to do a senior satisfaction survey once a year. We just wrapped that up yesterday, so I don't have a pretty slide for you on that. We just finished analyzing those results yesterday, but I do have a couple things I do want to share with you. And this totally, we need to recognize Becky Nolan and Carrie Wheatley for this program. All of those trip numbers, all of that engagement with those seniors and the help they provide, that's two individuals doing all of this. They received 100% good to excellent ratings for overall satisfaction. The average age, we have about 81% of our riders are between 60 and 84, so we're really hitting our demographic. We have quite a few seniors that are about 19% of them are over the age of 85, so about 72% of them are using it strictly for medical, but there's quite a few of them that are adopting it for what they call urgent need interim. One of the things we got out of this survey was seniors asking for a multi-leg trip, doctor, prescription, home. And so we will be implementing that next month. We're going to have a meeting next week with our team to see how we can functionalize that into our software and still make that happen for them. So we're just really, 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 really excited about this. One of the things that we found interesting was most of our riders are fairly new in this program. They've been here about 3 to 4 years. The vast majority of people, when we asked how the new riders, how they had heard about us, 85% of them said they were referred by a family or friend that had already used the service in the past, which again goes to speak to how well Becky and Carrie manage the service and how thankful everybody is for it. So these are our community development block grants. As a reminder, this is our partnership between the City Planning Department. This is where we sit with our bus pass distribution. We've talked about the demand for that, and my team's actively looking for some alternate funding sources that we can use to braid together to this to get ourselves off of a waiting list for bus passes in this program for homeless and low income. One thing you see here is the share of fares only at 76%. If you'll recall, right before the pandemic, our standard provider for that went out of business and we were unable to do it. We used to use a voucher type program where they didn't expire and it was very affordable. We had to kind of transition without a lot of time to plan into a different system where it's more of a trip subsidy system where they get the first $4 paid for us by us. It's just not affordable enough for our seniors, and so we're actively looking in 2025 on how we can bump up the way that the share fare program runs and make it more helpful for the seniors. But again, we're looking for funding to do that as well. So this is one of our flagship programs. It's part of our senior services that we offer. You can see that our ridership has steadily increased despite hitting the pandemic in FY 2021. Current year to date for fiscal year 23-24, we're at 3,636 trips, so you can see that it is continuing to grow. We did an EmbarkWell case study in the first year of launch for this to determine, if this was really impacting health outcomes for seniors, and we discovered that it was. Well over 80% of them were able to reduce their A1C scores through the use of a regular exercise. We are going back again this year, and so we're hoping by December to have our second follow-up case study done so that we can continue to show how this program is impacting the health and well-being of our seniors in the city. So those types of studies that we do, it helps us tremendously when we apply for grants because we can really point to them and say, we're not just providing a trip. We are moving the needle on the health of these individuals to help them age in place in their home. Climb Ride is just doing fantastic. If you'll recall, this started as a transportation innovation grant through the Arnall Family Foundation. It was a demonstration project trying to demonstrate what could be accomplished if you paired public transit and mobility with social services to move the needle on an outcome. So as you'll recall, you recently approved our permanent funding agreement with DHS to permanently fund this as a program in Oklahoma County and also to expand it from 50 to 100 families. So we have fully completed that expansion launch. We have 2 new mobility program coordinators, Isaac Skanes and Gennaro Castellanos. They're working actively with DHS, and we are now serving a full 100 families, and we have completely cleared the waiting list. We're very confident in how this program works going forward in terms of how many trips it's going to be for a given number of people. And so we're very excited to see what this is going to look like in the coming years as other counties try to bring this into their system and stuff for child welfare. We want to move the needle across the state, not just in Oklahoma County. That's the ultimate goal. Palomar and Remerge are doing fantastic. Remerge launched in November of 2023, and so far through the end of February, we're at just a little over 1,200 trips. Palomar is doing quite well. We're excited to let you know that one of the things that resulted from the Transportation Innovation Grant with Arnall, if you'll recall, that was a 4-year grant, and we came so far under budget that the Arnall Family Foundation agreed to allow us to go 5 years and could try to continue to spend the money out. Well, that 5 years runs out on April 15th of this year. We're still coming in under budget, and they have graciously agreed to give us the balance that we have left over once the grant is closed out to buy 2 vehicles to help support the Climb Ride going forward. So we're tremendously thankful to their support for that because they didn't have to do that for us. So we're very excited. We do have our 2 new vehicles on site, and I have not had a chance to get a picture of it because by the time I get to work, she's out picking at people in it. So, but we will get you some pictures of those 2 new vehicles soon. So I wanted to kind of touch base with you. We talked about this several presentations. We are still moving forward with our assumption of this funding stream for seniors and individuals with disabilities. That money will move over on October 1st of 2024, which is the beginning of the federal fiscal year. We are in the middle box where the governor changes the direct recipient designee. In fact, I have a meeting with Jason and Jesse next week when he returns to kind of talk about that next step and how that's going to look like and the meetings around that so we can move forward. We will continue to share more information on this planning and how this program is going to work as we move a little bit further forward in it, and we've had to have that opportunity to have that meeting with the FTA and ODOT. As you recall, back in 2022, we received a Innovative Coordinated Access and Mobility Grant from the Federal Transit Administration to replace our mobility scheduling and coordination software. That process is moving forward. Our request for proposals is closed. We received 4 very strong responses. We're incredibly pleased with the bids that we have. We are in the middle of, we had our first review committee meeting and are working through those proposals now. So we will bring a contract award to you, maybe not next month, but definitely by June. And the last thing I wanted to share with you is just kind of some outreach and recognition. We like to toot the horn of our team. So you can see that that's a post from Embark's social media where we took some shots at the Ward 7 Town Hall at Mount Olive Baptist Church, and that's my mobility team there. And I wanted to point out to you that little comment down at the bottom that one of the citizens came back to us on social media and said, "Every interaction I've had with Embark's mobility management team on behalf of our residents has been positive, timely, and they provide great customer service. They are wonderful." And I will second that emotion. I probably have one of the greatest teams in the world. So speaking of that and greatness, you'll see a picture here of Tim Arnold. Tim Arnold is one of our paratransit operators, a transit professional. He has been selected as the City of Oklahoma City's Kiwanis Employee of the Month for April of 2024. He was also recently featured in the Oklahoma Transit Association's Drivers Doing Good segment for his work. I'll tell you a little bit about what happened. We have a medically fragile passenger who also has a medically fragile son, and they traveled together. Tim was transporting them to some therapy appointments, and they had a medical episode on the vehicle. Tim remained calm. He got emergency services there. He coordinated with the case manager and the case management team that helps this passenger with her disability and was able to completely resolve the situation to everyone's satisfaction. He did such a good job. I didn't actually get the information to nominate him for the coroner because that came straight out of the letters from the case managers. Because they took the time, he did such a good job, they took the time to come back to us and say, we really appreciate this. And so we're very, very proud of Tim. Another thing I'm going to be sharing with you in July when I come back is we had another paratransit operator, Jennifer Smith, has qualified for the National Finals Drivers Rodeo Skill Competition. And so she will be doing that in June. So we're very hopeful that we're going to be coming back to you to tell you that we have a national championship driver on our team. And with that, that's all I have. I'll remind you, if you have anybody that you want to refer to us, our email is simple, mobilitymanagement@okc.gov. It goes to our entire team, and we will get back to them as soon as we can.
Thank you, Marilyn. Appreciate it.
Thanks for the presentation, and just to, that first part of it that you described with going from the doctor to the pharmacy, I got to experience that firsthand with my mom after her fall, where, we went to her doctor's appointment. So I drove her, this is before Embark stepped in, but I drove her to the doctor's appointment. Then we had to go to the pharmacy and, then back to her house. And that first appointment, the prescription wasn't ready, right? So these sorts of experiences, I think, are very, very common, and I'm just incredibly and eternally grateful for the service that you all provide. She sends her sincere regards as well. And then, I was watching a PBS NewsHour segment earlier in the week. It's called State Law. Oh, goodness. State laws create disparities in access to government food benefits. And it was just talking about SNAP. And there's this, just listening to your presentation, it made me think about who a lot of probably our residents are in the city, in the metro area. But the story began with the single mother in South Carolina, Betsy Cruz, who's talking about how, I'm just reading from the transcript, how every trip to the grocery store is a tightrope. And she was saying how I have to calculate down to the penny, because when I get to that register, I don't need any surprises, because if it comes over that amount, I have to ask them to put them back. And then the reporter says that amount that she receives is $56 a month. And that's the total benefit she and her 21-year-old son, Colton, receive from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And the reporter asked, is that enough to support and cover your food cost? And Betsy Cruz responds, no, it's not. You go to the grocery store and you come out with maybe 3 or 4 bags, and that's it. That's it for the month. To bridge the gap, she ends up going to food banks, and she's grateful. But she actually had to leave her job. She used to work, I'm just quoting here. I just want you all, when I watched this segment, it really took me back to knocking doors and thinking about a lot of the people I was meeting, made me think a lot of the service you're doing and your staff, which again, a very limited staff, right? But she had worked, Betsy did, as a government meat inspector for 3 decades, but she had to retire early and take a reduced pension after her son struggles with developmental and behavioral disability, like after those conditions for him worsened. Since she says, it's not that I don't want to work, I can't. And she says, I have no choice. I'm a mother first.
Correct.
And it's been 21 years of it. He has to come first. That was the thing I can't get out of my head right now.
Yeah.
And the reporter says that the Cruz family's not alone. About 90% of SNAP recipients live, and this goes to what you were describing earlier, about 90% of SNAP recipients live in households with older adults, children, or someone with a disability.
Right.
So like when you were describing that, I was just like, oh my gosh, and that's probably people, some of them who aren't even on SNAP, right? But just have these struggles where someone in that home, they're taking care of them. It's someone with a disability. In South Carolina, to qualify for SNAP, a family of 2 must make less than $25,700 a year. And in 2022, that was 600,000 people, 12% of that state's population. And you might wonder why I mentioned South Carolina. Well, that statistic reflects the national picture. That's what it says here. So I've said it before, I will continue to say it. The work, Dr. Dillon, that you are doing with your very limited staff, I'm eternally grateful. I will always advocate for you all to receive as much money. I hate that you all have to, the grants and the pulling it all together to make it work, because I just think there's so many people in this metro, in this city, who are living the experience like Betsy Cruz and her child. And I think it's really easy for a lot of folk to forget that. And I just wanted to name it in public. I wanted to personalize it for my own family. My mother lives on, I mean, she's 80 now, and she's retired disability from a car accident back in '93, you know, and had worked since she was 15, you know. And so, you know, lives on a fixed income Social Security disability. And I met so many people like that. And I just want to make sure that we speak their experiences into existence, because I think that that doesn't happen enough. And I'm just so grateful for what you all do.
We appreciate that. We appreciate that. And I will say, to your point about us having to go after the private grants and having to braid things together, we're not upset about that at all. In fact, it's one of the things that we are trying to push other mobility coordinators and other agencies. You know, stop relying on one source of funding. You can do so much more if you think a little bit outside of the box and understand how to take the funds and braid them together so they go further. And so we're not upset about that at all. You guys have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. Okay, our next presentation is Parking Services Report. Corey?
Good morning. I'll do my best to be brief. It's springtime's here, customer service amenities. We started pressure washing a couple of weeks ago, now that the cold seems to be gone. Arts District Garage, every year during the winter, garages are much like bridges. They freeze first. Successfully, in the past 8 years, we've yet to have a slip and fall over ice. We're not sparingly when we put out our de-icer. It is different than what is used on the streets. On the streets, they typically use a real salt. We use some other stuff so it doesn't corrode the rebar and the cables in the garages, but nevertheless, it leaves residue. So springtime's here. We've pressure washed Convention Center garage, the Arts District, Century Center, and then we're in the process of doing the Century Center. That was a bit of a challenge due to our neighbors sleeping in older buildings, had to do it during the day when most occupancy is higher. And then again, we have somebody that is operating in the building that sound of a loud piece of equipment can negatively affect their product. So that was just a bit of a challenge. General upkeep, where you'll see a lot of painting going on throughout some of the facilities. If you see some wet paint steins, please be respectful, because we probably left 5 minutes before you got there. And then the Century Center, we're looking at getting some quotes to convert that garage lighting system from high pressure, or metal halides, lights to the white lights that we like, the LEDs. Again, all in the name of customer service. And then staff continues to try to find a solution for some of the hotel validations. It's just very tedious to give somebody a handful of tickets, one ticket to be used per day. So looking at some technology, I'll be talking to some people at a small conference next week about that. Customer service. We started beginning training videos, not to be released to the public, so to speak, but for our frontline employees it seems to be a transient job. They don't stay too long, so knowledge is constantly evaporating. And so we'll be making some little training videos on how to fix the internal components of devices and whatnot. Also testing a radio system that works off of cellular. So far it's going well. That way we can economically equip every individual with a radio, so that when there's a major sporting event or major concert or whatnot, we can quickly adapt versus the telephone game. Our standard operating procedures update is about 95%. Again, these all bleed into staff knowledge and building that staff knowledge up. And then staff just recently began looking into some customer satisfaction surveys. Idea being like a QR code in the elevator to report back thoughts or whatnot. Very simple, quick feedback. Hourly and daily parkers is year over year. February, you'll see that our hourly was a little bit smaller than than the year before, and it kind of fluctuates. And then event, same thing, except it's going up this year. You know, as Suzanne commented, you know, the event and the transient business units, they just absolutely merge. And, you know, why use equipment, why use event staff, which is labor and whatnot, when there's, say, for example, a convention that's at the convention center, that a yard and garden show or whatnot, where people are going to be continuously coming and continuously going. We're adapting to letting the system work that so that we can save on the labor funds and putting those labor funds into the major events when people come in and leave all at one time. Again, the idea of pre-collecting for events is collect the revenue when people are trickling in, knowing that they're all going to leave at the same time in order to enhance customer experience. Monthly contract parking. I've answered quite a few questions as to why this year we've seen in July we had 3,000, then it dropped off. Then it came back up to 3,000 in November. You know, we have a tenant that uses one of our garages that works around the production movie business, and plain simple, we've watched that work start and stop. That's the large variance in monthly parking. With that, I am done, and this is the first time that I mentioned concrete.
That's good. Thank you, Corey. Are there any questions or comments on the parking? No? Thank you. Okay, but before we receive our program reports, I just want to call your attention to the last page of your packet, and it is the summary of services for 8 months year to date. And it shows in 2024, we have 2,222,000 riders in our transit system. And that's up 250,000 people from the year before, year to date, which is a great testament to well, I think what we're doing and what the staff is doing to provide easy access. 91,000 was the BRT, which just came online as opposed to last year, but the rest of that is services that we've had and just get better every year. So again, thank the staff and just call that to your attention that I think we're doing a good job. With that, is there a motion to receive our program reports? It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please vote electronically. Motion passes. Are there any items from the trustees? James, Robert?
No.
Nope. Okay. Suzanne?
I do have a couple of items.
Okay.
I'll keep it brief, but I did want to make you aware that this month, starting on April 15th, ETC will be conducting our rider survey. So the goal is to talk to 2,000 different people during Monday through Saturday, so getting weekday, weekend, different times of day, and then in fact they'll be out in the system, so it won't just be people who come to the transit center, it'll actually be throughout our system. We're also conducting the same survey in Norman for Norman operations, so wanted to make you aware of that. That's starting April 15th. We expect to have the report from ETC probably later this summer. So that would be one thing I wanted to share, and then I also wanted to share that we received an award from the Journal Record. I always like to highlight those awards because, of course, the RAPID, in this case, was the recipient of the award, the RAPID project. So this award is the 2023 Top Industrial Project Award. So the award spotlights local companies that did outstanding work on projects in the community. So this is the 5th year the Journal Record has done that award. So we recently learned that we have received it for the RAPID project. So those are the 2 things I'd like to share with you all today.
That's great, thank you. And thank you for sitting in for Jason today. He'll be back next month.
Thank you.
But we appreciate your work. Okay, with that, we will go ahead and move on into executive session. And thank you all. We are out of executive session, and item D, authorizing the administrator to settle without admission of liability in the case with Higer in the amount of $5,000 per the item on the agenda. Is there a motion?
I would move that.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. We'll do.
Aye.
Aye. Vote passes. Thank you. At that point, we are adjourned.